My parents forced me to give the house to my younger brother, but my answer shocked them. But it didn't stop there. My name is Angela, and I'm 33 years old. I never enjoyed family reunions. For most people, they're a time of warmth, of reminiscing over childhood memories and laughing over inside jokes that never get old. But for me, they were just an obligation, a mandatory performance where I played the role of responsible daughter while my younger brother, Jordan, basked in the glow of being the golden child. Twice a year, once at Christmas, once for my mother's birthday, we gathered at my parents' house for a meal that felt more like a well-rehearsed act than a celebration. I would sit there, nodding at all the right moments, pretending not to notice how my parents barely asked about my life but hung on to Jordan's every word, no matter how inane. It didn't matter that I was 33, financially independent, and had built a stable life on my own. In their eyes, I was just the safety net, the one who would always be there to catch Jordan when he inevitably fell. And fall, he did. Jordan, at 30, had never held down a job for more than 6 months. He'd never paid rent, never bought his own groceries, and certainly never contributed a single dollar to my parents' household, despite living there rent-free. He'd bounced from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, convinced that the world simply hadn't recognized his true potential yet. Meanwhile, I had worked my ass off to get where I was. Long nights, endless sacrifices, building a career that let me live comfortably. But to my parents, none of that mattered as much as ensuring Jordan was taken care of. This year, though, something felt different. The moment I stepped through the door of my parents' house, I knew something was off. My mother greeted me with an enthusiasm that felt excessive, her smile too wide, her eyes practically twinkling with excitement. My father, normally gruff and passive, actually looked pleased. And Jordan? He sat at the head of the table, grinning like the cat who had swallowed the canary. I narrowed my eyes. That grin of his had always been a bad sign. Still, I played along, I went through the motions. Polite greetings, small talk, the obligatory discussion about traffic. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked into a trap. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. A heavy, expectant silence settled over the table. Here it comes, I thought. We have some wonderful news, my mother chirped, clasping her hands together. She was practically glowing. I set down my fork, waiting. Jordan stood up, holding his glass like he was about to make a goddamn toast. So, after talking it over, he announced, voice thick with self-satisfaction, Mom and Dad decided that it makes the most sense for me to move into your house. Silence. For a long, stretched-out moment, I just stared at him, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Had I misheard? Had he actually just said that? My mother, ever the enthusiastic co-conspirator, clapped her hands together. Yes, sweetie, since you travel so much for work, it's silly to let that house sit empty. Jordan needs a place, and your house is just perfect for him. My stomach dropped. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't hinted at it. They had just decided. Jordan, the jobless, irresponsible, never paid a bill in his life Jordan, was simply going to move into my home like it was the most natural thing in the world. I slowly set my fork down and reached for my wine glass. I took a deliberate sip, letting the tannins coat my tongue, buying myself a few extra seconds. The tension at the table was thick, my parents watching me expectantly, Jordan still grinning like he had just hit the jackpot. I swallowed, then, in the most casual voice I could manage, said, "That's funny, because I sold the house last week." The reaction was immediate. Jordan's smirk vanished. My mother's face paled. My father, who had been mid-sip of his drink, choked on it. What? My mother finally managed, her voice an octave higher than before. I shrugged, reaching into my bag. "I sold it," I repeated, pulling out a thick envelope. I slid it across the table toward Jordan. "And since I figured you might try something like this, I even brought proof." Jordan snatched the envelope, ripping it open with frantic hands. His eyes darted across the document, growing wider with each passing second. No, you can't do this," he sputtered, his voice cracking. Mom and Dad said, "Mom and Dad don't own my house," I cut in sharply. Then, turning to my parents, I added, "And neither do you." My mother's eyes filled with tears. But your brother needs a place to live, she wailed, clutching her chest like I had just committed some unspeakable crime. I sighed, leveling her with a steady gaze. He's 30, he can figure it out. Jordan slammed the papers onto the table. You can just buy another place, he shouted, voice laced with outrage. Let me stay in your apartment until then. I laughed, actually laughed, because how else was I supposed to react to this level of delusion? You think I'm just going to buy a whole new house because you need a place to crash? I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. Do you even hear yourself? But Jordan wasn't listening. He was spiraling, his entitlement unraveling into pure desperation. He turned to our parents, eyes pleading. Tell her she can't do this. My father, who had been mostly silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was cold, disapproving. This is selfish, Angela. I turned to him, incredulous. Selfish, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You mean selfish like expecting me to give my house to Jordan? Selfish like deciding my property is his without even asking me? You know, he's not as successful as you, my father said, his tone heavy with that same old disappointment I'd been hearing my whole life. He's struggling. You could help. I took a deep breath, my grip tightening around my wine glass. No, I said, my voice firm. I could help. But I won't. Because he's struggling by choice, because you never made him take responsibility for himself, and I refuse to clean up the mess you created. I stood up, grabbing my coat. You're on your own this time, Jordan sputtered. My mother sobbed, my father glared, but I didn't care. I turned my back on them and walked out the door. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the fallback plan, the fixer, but this time, I barely made it to my car before my phone started buzzing. It was my mother, again. Her name flashed across the screen, vibrating with an urgency that was almost comical given the circumstances. I stared at it, debating whether to answer, but I already knew what was coming. More guilt, more screaming, more demands. I let it ring. A second later, a text came through. Mum, how could you do this to us? I sighed, shoving my phone into my bag. I should have expected this. Back in the dining room, after I had calmly declared that I'd sold my house, the house they had so generously gifted, to Jordan without my knowledge, all hell had broken loose. My mother's face had crumpled, the forced enthusiasm from earlier now replaced by something raw and ugly. Her voice had gone high-pitched, shaking with fury. How could you? She screeched. How could you do something so cruel to your own family? My father, usually the quiet enforcer, sat stiffly in his chair, his jaw tight. His disappointment radiated across the table, a silent but crushing weight. Jordan, on the other hand, was anything but silent. You sold it? You just sold it? He was standing now, his chair scraping against the floor as he shoved it back. His face was red, his breathing heavy, his whole body shaking with rage. What the hell, Angela? You knew I needed that place. I tilted my head, giving him a long, hard look. Did I? You knew Mom and Dad were planning for me to move in? His voice cracked, wild with disbelief. They said... I cut him off. That's the problem, Jordan. They said, but they never asked. He slammed his fist on the table. You can just buy another place, just get another house and let me stay there. I blinked, taken aback by the sheer audacity. You seriously think I'm going to drop another 6 figures on a house just so you can have a place to crash? I let out a dry laugh. You're 30, get your own damn house. Jordan's mouth opened, then closed. For a second, I thought he might actually try to argue, but before he could, my father finally spoke. This is selfish, Angela, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I turned to him slowly, that familiar chill settling over me. Excuse me? You know Jordan isn't as successful as you, my father continued, his gaze hard and unwavering. You have more than enough. You should be helping, not turning your back on your family. I exhaled, a slow, measured breath. There it was, the same tired excuse, the same manipulation. I met his stare, refusing to flinch. You're right, Dad. Jordan isn't successful. But that's not my fault, it's yours. You've babied him his entire life. You've never let him fail, never made him face consequences, and now, here he is, a grown man still expecting other people to clean up his mess. My mother gasped, clutching her chest like I had just slapped her. "That's not true," she shrieked. "We gave you both the same love, the same chances," I scoffed. "You grounded me for getting an A-. Jordan burned down the garage and you told the insurance company it was electrical failure." She opened her mouth, then shut it again. "Exactly." I pushed back from the table and stood, smoothing down my blouse. "I'm done being your safety net. Find someone else to fix Jordan's problems." Jordan was still standing, his fists clenched, his eyes darting between our parents and me like he couldn't quite process what was happening. "You can't just walk away," he said, his voice tight. "You can't?" I grabbed my coat and slung it over my arm. "Watch me." Then I walked out the door. It started with the calls. At first, it was just my mother, then my father, then Jordan, then all three of them, over and over, cycling through their numbers like a coordinated military operation. They left voicemails, they sent texts. "Mum, you don't understand what you've done. Call me back. Dad, this is disgusting behavior, Angela. We raised you better than this. Jordan, you're a heartless teach. You ruined my life." I ignored them. Then came the Facebook posts. I found out when an old high school friend sent me a screenshot with the message, "What's going on?" My stomach dropped as I clicked the image. It was a long, dramatic post from my mother's profile, complete with crying emojis and a black and white photo of our family from years ago when Jordan and I were kids. Mum's post, it breaks my heart to say this, but I never thought I would see the day when my own daughter would turn her back on her family. We have always loved her, supported her, but now she has abandoned us in our time of need. She sold the house, leaving her poor brother without a place to live, even though she has more than enough. I don't know what we did to deserve this, but please keep us in your prayers during this difficult time. The comments section was a circus. Aunt Linda, "Oh my God, what happened?" Cousin Sarah, "That's horrible. How could she do that to you?" Random church lady, "I will pray for you. God sees everything, dear." And of course, right there in the middle of the chaos, Jordan, egging them on. "Jordan, she didn't just sell the house. She did it behind our backs. No warning. She doesn't care about anyone but herself." A slow, simmering rage built in my chest. They weren't just mad. They were painting me as the villain. Over the next few days, the floodgates opened. Family members started calling. Friends started texting. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my betrayal. Aunt Linda, "Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, but please talk to your mother. She's devastated." Cousin Sarah, "I'm not trying to take sides, but maybe you could have let Jordan stay for a little while." My old babysitter, "I saw your mum's post. Family is important, Angela. You shouldn't forget that." Forget that? I had spent my entire life putting family first. I had spent years bailing them out, paying their bills, cleaning up their messes. And now that I had finally drawn a line, I was the monster. I clenched my phone, my fingers shaking. I could feel the anger curling in my stomach, coiling tighter and tighter. They wanted to guilt me, they wanted to shame me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I had given them everything. And this was how they repaid me? Fine. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them one. I opened my settings and started blocking numbers. Mum, Dad, Jordan. One by one, I shut them out. Then, just to make sure they got the message, I went back to Facebook, deleted every family member, and changed my privacy settings. They wanted a war? They had just lost their main target. I should have known they wouldn't stop. Blocking their numbers, deleting them from my life. It was satisfying, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. People like my parents, like Jordan, don't just accept consequences, they lash out. At first, the silence was almost unsettling. No texts, no calls, no guilt-tripping messages from extended family. It was quiet, too quiet. And then the emails started. The first one was from my bank. "Dear Miss Hamilton, we received a request to reset your online banking credentials. If you did not initiate this request, please contact us immediately." I stared at the screen, my pulse picking up. I hadn't requested anything. The next email came an hour later. Angela, just confirming your address change request. Let us know if you need further assistance updating your records. I felt my stomach drop. What the hell? It didn't take long to figure out what was happening. Jordan, that useless, entitled, jobless leech, had apparently decided that if he couldn't live off me directly, he'd just become me. He had called my bank, pretending to be me, trying to gain access to my account. He'd also contacted my real estate broker, attempting to change my address on file. Why? Because he was hunting for me. Maybe he wanted to steal money, maybe he just wanted to show up at my new place and demand I fix everything. Either way, he was desperate. And he was reckless. I spent the next few hours locking everything down. Bank accounts, locked. Credit cards, frozen. Two-factor authentication, enabled on everything. Then I called my lawyer. Enough is enough, I said, pacing the length of my living room. I want to take legal action. I want them to know they can't touch me anymore. She didn't hesitate. Gather every piece of evidence you have. We're going to shut this down. And that's exactly what I did. I collected everything, the threatening texts, the Facebook slander, the fake banking attempts. I even had a recording from my real estate agent who had grown suspicious when Angela Hamilton couldn't answer a single security question correctly. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter so brutal, so airtight that it should have made them back off. It should have been enough, but they weren't just petty, they were stupid. Instead of stopping, they sued me. I got the legal notice a week later. At first I laughed. This has to be a joke, but it wasn't. Jordan and my parents had actually filed a lawsuit against me for emotional distress, for financial abandonment, for ruining Jordan's future. According to them, my decision to sell my house had caused severe mental anguish for my poor, struggling little brother. My refusal to house him had left him homeless and destitute. And the best part? They claimed I had more than enough money to help, but had selfishly chosen not to. I wanted to burn the entire world down. They had spent my whole life using me, treating me like an ATM, a walking, talking backup plan. And the one time I said no, they turned me into a villain. Fine. If they wanted a fight, I was about to bury them. Court was exactly what I expected, a circus. Jordan showed up looking like a mess, his ill-fitting suit making him look like a kid playing dress-up. My mother wore black, like she was attending a goddamn funeral. My father sat beside her, stiff and stone-faced, radiating self-righteous fury. Their lawyer, a discount, bottom-tier hack who probably took their case just for the check. Mine, a pit bull. From the moment the judge entered, it was over for them. My lawyer eviscerated them. Exhibit A, the identity theft attempt. Jordan had tried to access my accounts. That alone was a felony. Exhibit B, the blackmail messages. The texts from Jordan, the passive-aggressive voicemails from my mother, all demanding I do the right thing. Exhibit C, the Facebook slander. My mother's posts, the comments from Jordan, the sheer amount of effort they had put into smearing my name. The judge barely let them speak. The ruling, immediate dismissal. Jordan stood up, his face red with rage. "This isn't fair," he yelled, voice cracking. She ruined my life." The judge gave him a cold stare. "Sit down, Mr. Hamilton, or I will hold you in contempt." I smiled, but I wasn't done. I had spent my whole life cleaning up their messes. Now, they were going to clean up mine. The next day, I sued them for defamation and harassment. Jordan laughed when he got the notice. He thought I was bluffing until he lost. The court ruled in my favor. Jordan and my parents were ordered to pay a 5-figure settlement, and because my parents had co-signed on Jordan's debts, guess what? They were financially responsible too. My mother called, sobbing. "Angela, please, you don't have to do this. We're your parents." I let out a slow breath. "You should have thought about that before you tried to ruin my life." She cried harder. "We don't have the money to pay for this. Please, baby, please, just let it go." I smiled, no, and then I hung up. Jordan? He didn't even try to call, because now, for the first time in his entire life, he had to deal with the consequences of his own actions. And I was finally free. I was done with them. After the lawsuit, after cutting them off, after forcing them to finally pay the price for everything they had done, I truly believed that was it. No more phone calls, no more manipulation, no more drama. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. But then, one evening, just as I was settling into my new normal, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, you won. But you should know something. It was from Jordan. I almost deleted it without reading it. Almost. Instead, I clicked, and within seconds, my blood ran cold. Angela, I don't expect you to care. Hell, I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe because for the first time, I finally understand just how deep this mess goes. You thought they used you? They used me too. They've been lying to both of us for years. I frowned, gripping my phone tighter. Remember when they told me I had an inheritance? That if I was patient, if I just waited, I'd be set for life? That's why I never worried about getting my shit together. Because I believed them. Because I thought one day I'd be taken care of. But guess what? There was never any inheritance, not a single fucking cent. They lied the whole time. And it's worse than you think. They don't just have debt. They owe money to the kind of people who don't forgive. Over 100 grand. Loan sharks, Angela, the real kind, the ones who don't take late payments lightly. And now that they're broke, now that they have nothing left, those people are coming to collect. My stomach was still twisting from the email when there was a knock at my door. It was nearly midnight. No one came to my place unannounced. A sinking feeling settled deep in my gut. I walked cautiously to the door and peered through the peephole. Jordan. Except, he looked nothing like the smug, entitled brat I'd grown up with. He was pale, his eyes hollowed, his shoulders hunched, and when I opened the door, he practically stumbled inside, shoving past me like a man running from something. I barely had time to register the panic in his face before he pulled up his sleeve. A massive dark bruise stretched across his forearm. I sucked in a sharp breath. They came to the house, he whispered. His voice was hoarse, raw. I felt my skin prickle. Who? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. The people they owe. I stared at him. What do you mean, came to the house? He exhaled shakily, rubbing his bruised arm. I was there when they showed up. 3 guys, big, the kind of guys who don't leave empty-handed. A chill slithered down my spine. They trashed the place, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Smashed furniture, took everything valuable, left a message. I couldn't bring myself to ask, but I had to. What message? Jordan turned haunted eyes toward me. Next time, they won't just be breaking furniture. I had spent years thinking my parents' worst sins were emotional manipulation, financial leeching, and blatant favoritism. But this was something else. They weren't just irresponsible, they were criminals. They had borrowed money from dangerous people, made promises they couldn't keep, and now they were dragging everyone down with them. I felt rage curling in my stomach like wildfire. And let me guess, I said, coldly, they expect me to fix it. Jordan hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. They think you're the only way out. Of course they did, because in their world, Angela's the fixer. Angela's the backup plan. Angela's the safety net. I let out a bitter laugh. Not this time. Jordan flinched, looking down. I told them you wouldn't. But they don't care. They'll try anyway. I crossed my arms, jaw clenched. Let them try. But even as I said it, I knew. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I had spent my entire life being their safety net, their backup plan, their exit strategy whenever things went south. Not anymore. This time, I was the one cutting the cord. Jordan sat across from me in my living room, his leg bouncing anxiously. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, like someone had stripped away all the arrogance, all the entitlement, and left behind a man who was finally, for the first time in his life, terrified. They're out of time, he murmured. His fingers fidgeted in his lap, rubbing at the dark bruise on his arm. They came once already. They'll come again. And next time, they won't just be looking for money. He didn't need to spell it out. I knew what he meant. Our parents had gotten in too deep. They had borrowed from people who didn't make polite phone calls when payments were overdue. They didn't send late notices. They collected by any means necessary. And now that my parents had nothing left to give, they were in debt. I took a slow breath, setting my coffee mug down on the table. It was decision time. I'm not paying their debt, I said finally. My voice was flat, even. Jordan flinched, but he didn't argue. He knew. He had been expecting it. He just didn't want to hear it out loud. But I'm not just going to stand by and let this keep spiraling, I continued, so I'm taking action. His brows furrowed. What do you mean? I met his gaze. I'm calling the cops. My parents had spent years getting away with things simply because no one had ever held them accountable. Not this time. I handed everything over. Bank statements, fake loan applications, fraudulent credit lines, proof of identity theft attempts. I even had the messages from their creditors threatening them. The voice recordings from my real estate agent about Jordan's failed attempt to steal my information. It was airtight, and it was damning. The detective on the other end of the phone listened carefully, asking follow-up questions. By the time I finished, there was a long pause. This is a serious case, he finally said. I let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, I figured. We'll move quickly on this, I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Good. And then for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I was letting the professionals handle it. I got a call the next morning from the detective. You might want to turn on the news. So I did, and there they were, my mother and father being led out of their home in handcuffs. My mother was wailing, her voice shrill as she protested to the cameras. This is all a misunderstanding, she sobbed, her hands cuffed behind her back. We're good people, this is all Angela's doing. My father, ever the silent force, kept his lips pressed into a tight, grim line. But there was rage in his eyes. Oh, he was furious. Furious that he was finally being held accountable. Furious that I had beaten him at his own game. The charges? Fraud, tax evasion, financial deception, theft. The sentence? 5 years. I exhaled, a long, slow breath. I wasn't happy. There was no thrill in watching my parents being arrested. No satisfaction in seeing my mother's tears or my father's stony silence. But I didn't feel guilty either. They had done this to themselves. They had spent years lying, stealing, and manipulating their way through life. This was the price. A few days later, Jordan showed up at my apartment again. This time he wasn't frantic, he wasn't desperate, he just looked exhausted. They're offering me a deal, he said, sinking onto my couch. I set my mug down. A deal? He let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, either I cooperate and help them build their case, or I get dragged down with them. I tilted my head, and he rubbed a hand over his face. I don't know why they're giving me a chance. I don't deserve one. I studied him carefully. For the first time in his life, Jordan was at a crossroads. The old Jordan would have tried to weasel his way out of it. He would have made excuses, blamed someone else, thrown a tantrum. But this Jordan? He looked ashamed. They told me if I testify, if I help them put all the pieces together, I get probation, community service, no jail time. I leaned back in my chair. Sounds like a good deal, he scoffed. Yeah, but it means telling them everything. About the loans, about the accounts Mum and Dad used, about how I went along with it even when I knew it was wrong. I shrugged. So tell them. His gaze snapped up to mine. I held it, unwavering. You wanted a fresh start? This is it. Take it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly he nodded, and for the first time in 30 years, Jordan finally made the right decision. A few months later, I stood in front of a small beachside house, keys in my hand. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't big, but it was mine, and the best part? No one knew where to find me. No calls, no guilt trips, no manipulation, no family members draining me dry. For the first time in my life, I was free. I took a deep breath, letting the salty ocean air fill my lungs. My parents were rotting in prison, Jordan was actually getting his life together, and me? I was finally living the life I had fought so hard to have. And it felt damn good. Finally, Angela won against the bad guys labeled as family. What do you think about this ending? Leave your comments.